The stealthy hunting dog. Got her eyes locked on a bear about 300 yards away, easily. It's crazy. Wednesday morning, June 28th. Excuse me, just woke up. And I've switched from coffee to Japanese green tea, chilled. And I'm going to slowly try and experiment and wean off some caffeine for a bit. Now, here I am, coming to you live from the oversized labor camp called Earth. Funny, when you turn on the laptop or the computer, automatically goes to all the what they consider current events of the globe, news events of the globe, and they share it with us in front of our face without looking for it. And I glance down from the top down and realize all these topics are junk. There's one topic on that screen, news topics that the mainstream tries to push on us that's worthy, not one. It's all junk. Junk. Kind of creepy. One topic, though, I shared last night was the fact that up here in Canada, Stan, our dictator, is slowly and surely tightening the noose on the Canadian people. They made it illegal to protest. Can't protest. Can't speak out against non-truth. That has a negative impact on human beings. And now, pretty soon, well, it's put into place now that Canada is going to control what news or what people talk about in Canada across the board on the internet. How freaking amazing is that? How amazing is that? How amazing is that the human herd let that happen? I wonder how bad it's going to get. It's going to get a lot worse. Way worse up here. Apparently, they say Australia's 6 months ahead in the carnage against the people. 6 months ahead. And it's fun, you would think, and I'm not saying this to be insulting, but let's face it, the original non-Australian inhabitants were of absolute criminal DNA lineage. You'd think the Australians would have some badass kick-ass in them from that DNA, and kick-ass, you would think. Anyway. Yeah, all garbage topics online. news topics that they promote. Garbage, like absolute garbage. So, it's funny how many channels do take those topics and read them in the morning, report them to the people and they're following on the YouTube channel and make a shit pile of money and carry on. It's a waste of time promoting all that shit. One thing I will say though is none of us would be here today. Not one of you or I would be here today unless a man and a woman came together. So bravo for them. Now, moving along. What do we got? Excuse me. We got a lot of voices. So I shall mark these as read. These are fairly recent in the recent column here, I think. As soon as I get this done, I'm going to go out and sling bales of hay in this heat all day. Title of my encounter. Hey, I thought that it was about time for me to share my experience with everyone. I've had multiple paranormal experiences throughout my life. From seeing a thunderbird to multiple UFOs, but the one that sticks out the most to me is my Sasquatch experience. For some context, I grew up in a very rural area in central Nova Scotia, spending most of my time as a kid in the woods hunting squirrels or hunting with my dad. So I was very familiar with the woods and the wildlife in the woods, but one day after school I was at the babysitter's house, which was around 10 kilometers from where I lived. Me and another boy who was a year younger than me, I was 9 and he was 8, this was in 2010 for some reference. We were playing in the woods as boys do when we saw a toad on the ground. So we both kneeled down to take a look at it. When all of a sudden, I felt almost like a pressure all around me, which compelled me to look up. When I did, I saw my friend staring at something. I followed his eyes, and there I saw it. A 7-foot tall, relatively skinny, dark brown ape. It lifted its arms and let out a roar that shook me to my core, and I felt an indescribable fear. I yelled, "Run!" to my friend, even though I felt that it had no intention to hurt us, and we booked it out of there. When I looked back to see if it was following us, it was gone, just like it vanished. When we got back to the house, we tried to explain it to the babysitter, but she just said it was the neighbor, not to worry about it. As I got older, I convinced myself it was a dream, until one day when I was 16 and went out rabbit hunting in the same woods. I just got off my four-wheeler and started walking into the woods when I stopped dead in my tracks, and that feeling of fear came back. I just stood there paralyzed, and all I had was a 17 HMR. Needless to say, I got the hell out of there. But I still wasn't 100% convinced until a few years later, me and the same friend from the babysitters were drinking one night and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Did we see a Bigfoot when we were kids?" I felt such a massive amount of relief knowing that it actually happened. I know it's a pretty generic story, but I just felt like getting it out there. And feel free to use my name and I wish you well. Kyle? Angevine? I hate butchering people's names. I butcher a lot of shit. Kyle, appreciate you, man. Welcome to the club. You've been in the club a long time. You've seen it. You know what you saw. It's funny how children can do that though, right? We'll end up going through life thinking something was just a dream, didn't happen. Carry on. It happened. Alright. This next one is titled Fear. Actually, I better title it Red. I did. Excuse me. Steve, please don't use my name. A little about me. I grew up a little more country than most down here in southwest Georgia. Not scared of shit. That includes death. But this morning, put a fear in me like no other. Back in the 90s, I worked at a hunting plantation on the Warrior Creek. The Warrior Creek, that sounds familiar. I think I might have seen that sign before, driving down there. We put up a new stand in a section on the creek that just recently had access. Nobody had hunted it in years. We cleared out and put a food plot in. The first morning I got to bow hunt it, I was excited to say the least. As I walked back there, I heard a noise that sounded like a male lion roar about 400 yards further down the creek. I ignored it as a cotton module truck crossing an old stone bridge on the road about that distance. About 4 more steps pushing through that corn food plot, excuse me, I heard it again, only louder, at about half the distance. Again, I said to myself, it's only a truck and trailer on that old bridge. Just my mind playing tricks, or the creek bottom distorting the sound. About 5 more steps and I'm through the food plot and at the base of the stand. The stand is on a wood line 20 yards from the creek. I heard it a third time, right behind me, maybe 15 feet. It rattled my chest and vibrated my body. That would so frickin' suck, wouldn't it? All I could think of is, there is no way to pull this bow back and aim before it pounced. So I dropped the bow, shot up the stand, pulled my skinning knife, and tried to control my breathing. I heard it walk back and forth behind my tree, like it was looking up to try to see me. It was bipedal. Then it left. It roared 3 more times, getting further away. This all happened in about 2 or 3 minutes. This was about an hour before daylight. I sat there till lunch. I couldn't move. When I did, I jumped out of the stand and ran back to the truck. I never went back to get the bow. It's still there as far as I know. I vowed never to go back in the woods with a large caliber pistol. I've never heard exactly what I heard that day. A guttural? Ew. He spelt it E-E-E-E-W-W-W. Like a lion that changed to a roar. Yes, common one, man. Starting high pitch and then leading into a deep, deep roar. To this day, I think of how it moved over 400 yards. Uh-oh, there's Adventure Dog. You want in, puppy? Sorry. To this day, I think of how it moved over 400 yards through the thickest shit you couldn't push through in just a few minutes without a sound. I felt like it was hunting me. Nowadays, I rifle hunt. Took years to get back to going to stands before sunup. Well, I'm here, I want to reply to an older man that wrote in on an experience he had with his wife at Black Rock Mountain State Park, North Georgia. You're not alone. Was up there 5 years ago on vacation. Around dusk, walked with my son to the gift shop. Had something matching me step for step. It was weird. We would stop, and 1 or 2 more steps would be made. Hope the guy made it through the COVID, so he hears this. I should have wrote in then. Maybe if he's still here, it would give him comfort to know he wasn't imagining it. Thanks, Steve. And you keep that sixth sense active out there. Anything that causes this kind of fear isn't from God. All right, there you go, man. Welcome to the Club of No Return. Is that going to be funny if someday we find out that that roar wasn't even meant to scare us? It's just our way of talking. Or something, right? Something very innocent. But meanwhile, it's absolutely terrifying to us. Somebody's going to chime in from that area now. Somebody else is going to chime in and they heard the same thing or experienced the same thing from that area without a frickin' doubt. Or more, right? All right. Title this one is Red. Oops. It's titled From Dash. Steve, not knowing how to access this website before, I recently sent you 2 updated emails to your email address. 3 years of listening to you. Ouch. What can I say? I'm not the sharpest tack in the box. I sent you an email about 6 months ago, but it was not very well written and lacked insights and reflections. So I emailed you another one a few days ago. I quickly said another one with essential material I forgot to include. A sore back and 2-finger typing. Didn't want to lose what took me a long time to write, so I sent it without really checking it. And of course, I forgot an important experience. The sound of a big bulldozer crashing through the woods towards my cabin in broad daylight. And like the creature was right next to me, that I could not see anything. Hell, I ran to the sound of what I was sure would be a big buck. And as you well know, bear would not make all that sound. It had nowhere to go, whatever it was, unless it was either cloaked or jumped dimensions or a lifetime living in the woods. And I'm so outclassed. Ignorance was bliss. You're loved and protected by many. Good brother, we have your back. Dash. Okay, man? It doesn't sound like I read those previous emails. You're gonna have to look, right? Yeah, we are so outclassed, it's absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. Did you hear that? It's absolutely ridiculous. Maybe we are created just to be glorified laborers here. What do you think? Might be. Wouldn't be hard to prove that, right? If you had to do a little report on it. Are we just living in a labor camp? What do you think? Steve, been watching your videos for the last couple of years, and I felt the time was finally right for me to share my story. Get this off my chest without all the ridicule and laughter that's been my reward for doing so in the past. I found the right place, man. The only person I've ever told was my wife at the time, now my ex, and she laughed and accused me of making it all up. Before I get to my encounter, I'll give you a little backstory. I was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1964. Up until my mid-20s, I never been on any higher ground than a couple of 100 feet above sea level. So, mid-80s to early 90s, my sister had got married and moved to Roan Mountain in eastern Tennessee. My wife and I took a trip up there to visit for a week. I couldn't wait to get up into those mountains. Here comes the encounter. After the first few days of running around and seeing the sights, we spent a day just hanging out at the house. This led to a few cold beverages being consumed and the grill getting fired up that evening. Later that night, around 9 p.m., I went out on the back porch to get another beer. It still blows my mind how that beer stayed cold just sitting on the back porch. That's when I noticed about half a dozen deer, about 100 yards out in the field behind the house. One had a nice rack, and I couldn't quite make out the number of points. So I slipped off the porch and eased over to the corner of the fence, which put me about 60 to 70 yards away from them. And as I'm standing there against the fence watching the deer, the big one was a nice 10-point, minimum 200 class. Whoa, that's big. That's when I noticed the moon. When I say noticed, I mean noticed. It was huge and seemed so much closer than I'd ever seen it before. Now, I've been out in the Gulf of Mexico at night and been able to witness the moon well away from any city lights, and you can see all kinds of detail on the surface of the moon with the naked eye. But that night in Tennessee, I finally understood what the word awesome means, or what awestruck means. So I'm standing at this fence and watching the deer. Or was supposed to be, but I can't take my eyes off this big, glowing, yellowish-orange ball of light that seems to be just out of reach. So after what I thought was around 20 minutes, later I found out it was more like an hour, I start noticing a tickling sensation on the back of my neck. I shrugged my shoulders and turned my neck a couple of times, trying to shake loose whatever it was that was tickling me. And just then, the deer got spooked and bounced away, and the noise finally forced me to break my gaze on the moon. That's when I realized that I'd probably been out there long enough and decided to go back inside. I took one last look and mumbled a wow at the beauty of this little sun-reflecting satellite that orbits our world, and that's when it hit me. I felt the hot breath of a very large creature hit the back of my neck at the same time, hearing or feeling the deepest chest rumbling I've ever heard. As I spun around to my right, looking over my shoulder, all I could see was black. As far as my peripheral vision would allow, it was all Sabe. This all happened in a split second. When I got my head around far enough, I realized that my face was maybe 8 to 10 inches away from this thing's upper abdomen. Looking up, I saw this beast's pectoral muscles stuck off his chest about 6 inches and were huge. His chest was every bit of 4.5 feet wide. His shoulders, they were as big as basketballs, added another foot or so on each side. From shoulder to shoulder, this thing was at least 6 feet wide. I did not get a good look at his hands or face, but his arms were probably more impressive than his chest and shoulders. If Hulk Hogan has 22-inch pythons, this bipedal beast was sporting 28 to 30-inch guns. His forearms would make Popeye jealous. His arms were covered in long dark hair, maybe 4 or 6 inches in length. Excuse me. If I had to guess, this behemoth must have been around 10 feet tall and 700 to 800 pounds. As far as his face goes, from the angle I was at, all I could make out was a squared off bearded chin. I could not see a nose, eyes, ears, raised brow ridge, conical shaped head, nothing. So I can't say for sure whether it looked more like a man or an ape. His arms were more like an ape's, but his chest was more human-like, just a little more hairy than most. Now this is where the story starts getting weird. As I mentioned earlier, it all happened in a split second. As I spun around and was in the process of looking up, this thing was going from a bent over position to a standing up straight and taking a step back and to his right. As he pulled his left leg over his right, it was like he was slipping through a slit in a green screen. I'm not sure if it was a portal or some sort of interdimensional doorway or what. All I know is this huge thing vanished within that split second. By the way, there was no smell associated with this creature like I hear in a lot of other stories you read. Now, there was a slight musty smell, but it reminded me of the same smell a horse gives off. I mean, you could smell it, but I'm not going to say it was a stench. I will say this. I hear a lot of people saying that these things are evil and demons, and they may be. All I know is, I got the impression that this beast was intelligent and appreciated my interest in the moon. The that he gave out made me feel the same way I would feel when I do something good that would make my grandfather proud, and he would give me the same approving that this Salve did. He just never had the same volume or power that this thing did. I don't know if this thing's the missing link, part human, from another dimension, species of ape, Nephilim, or what. I do know that they are real, and believe the government knows about them and has known about them for some time. My question is, what is it that these beings are capable of? The government feels like they need to keep them a secret from us. I sure wish they would put more effort in admitting the truth about these creatures than trying to trigger World War III. My name is Barry Sheets. Feel free to use my name if you want to. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. Keep doing what you're doing, brother. It's a beautiful thing. The truth shall set us free. Barry, that's one of those stories where your average human being would think you were morning Wheaties were spiked with some kind of crazy drug, and you're losing your shit. So, you're a very brave man, brave, honest man for coming forward with that story, right? Bizarre, right? How can so many people around the planet share witnessing basically the same, what we've been raised to believe is impossible? How does that happen? That's funny, your comment about the government. Yeah, you know my stance on that. I don't give a shit about them. I don't need nothing from them. Nothing. I do not need a group called government to tell me whether or not something's real today, that's for sure. The sooner we all realize that all we need is each other, that's when this lifetime gets real fun, right? All we need is each other, that's it. All we need to do is hear from each other. That's it. That's who we are. We're the people. There's nobody else. Except for these dirt frickin' bags that we think we elected and put somewhere to represent us, do good things for us, when that's not the case. It's not the case. It's just a dirty, filthy club. Once you get in, you're in. And then, yeah, I'll bite my lip. That's one hell of a story, man. There's something else to experience. Not too many people would share that publicly, right? Because it's just due to how we've been raised and the very, very limited of a what? Do you even call it knowledge? The horse shit they fed to us since we were kids. Is it knowledge? But the very limited amount of knowledge we've had access to has kept us thinking that experiences like this are not possible. People are crazy. People are crazy. People are crazy, right? Who come up with that word? People are crazy. Anyway, all right, here we go. Trying to stay on a positive note, even though the shit is crumbling all around me in this country. Let's listen to some more people. More people. Before I go hit that hot hayfield with the truck and trailer, slinging square bales of hay. All right, here we go. What's this? YouTube fan. Something that happened to me is the title of this email. Hi, Steve. Thank you for your channel. I'm impressed with your savvy and honesty. Thank you for the kind words. This happened many years ago. When I was 23, 24, and living in the San Lorenzo Mountains in Santa Cruz County, California. After listening to several early Dogman encounters that mentioned the sound of a woman screaming being heard, I then listened to Dogman encounters around real life American marvels. Alright, I'm not promoting channels, alright, I can't without knowing who they are. There's a lot of channels out there to try to discredit us. So, side note, country singer Lacey J. Dalton, born Jill Lynn Burham, had been living in the cabin prior to us moving in. It was 77 or 78. I was in my early 20s and working construction in the San Lorenzo Valley and Santa Cruz area. Myself and two friends had rented from the owner of the property, Janice, who lived in the main house/lodge. A small 32-foot by 16-foot, two-room plank wall cabin that was built entirely out of rough-cut lumber with 1-inch by 12-inch redwood boards with 1-inch by 4-inch battens that sided a 2-inch by 4-inch dimensional lumber frame. It was the pool cabin situated about 250 feet from the main house/lodge, and the in the ground cement swimming pool had water in it full. All right, a little bit of a typo. The cabin and pool was part of a larger 3 to 4 acre 1940s hunting estate with a number of outbuildings. Sounds like a pretty cool place to me. The pool cabin was located about 250 feet east and downhill from the lodge in the center of a large clearing approximately the size of a football field, 200 foot by 400 foot. This estate is located, about midway up Alba Road, just outside of and up the mountain from the town of Ben Lomond, California. The entire valley, including that area, was and is mostly covered in dense, large first and second growth redwood trees with oak and madrona trees interspersed. The steepness of the terrain varied from 20 to 45 degree slope. The property is also situated in between and a short distance from 2 creeks. The forest came right up to the edge and onto the property, with many large redwood trees on the property itself. And at night is very dark, except for the eastern sky. You don't see much. One night, shortly after moving in, it must have been the second or third night there, and probably was 11 to 12 p.m. We're hanging out inside reading and talking when we heard the blood-curdling scream of a woman. Man, needless to say, we ran outside, whereupon we heard the scream again. It's coming from the forest uphill from us, which was near as we could figure 200 to 300 yards away. The number of dogs in the surrounding areas began barking. We grabbed a flashlight and ran around the property trying to figure out what we could do, and where exactly the screams were coming from. We heard 3 to 4 screams total, and the only way I can describe them is we thought someone, a woman, was being murdered, as the scream itself was as if a woman had just come face to face with her worst fear. And now the screams themselves were both disturbing and confusing. For one thing, they were all identical, and the location of the screams seemed to move to the right by a distance of 100 feet or so. The duration of the screams being 4 to 5 seconds. Excuse me, there's dust in here or something. The duration of the screams being 4 to 5 seconds and the time in between each scream being 2 to 4 minutes was confusing. Now, what I mean by that is each scream we heard was so intense and so blood-curdling. How could it have been anything other than a person's final scream? A death yell, so to speak. And why were they lasting as long as they were? And how or why was there intervals between the screams? Realize these reflections came in hindsight. At the time we were quite rattled. Excuse me, got the old frog in the throat this morning. That whole thing lasted about 10 to 12 minutes, after which it got real quiet. We frantically talked about it, wondering what we could do, but we really had no idea. We didn't have a phone, the woods were pitch dark, and by this time our sole flashlight was getting dim. We decided to get in the truck and search for the source of the screams. So, we drove out our long driveway, we turned right onto Alba Road, headed up the hill and searched for the next driveway, which was not within a reasonable distance. We drove to the top, about a half a mile, turned around and came back down Alba and parked alongside the road in a pull-up place we figured was approximately parallel from where the screams had come from. We turned the engine off and listened. Now that the forest was so dark, dense and quiet, it didn't take long for us to realize how ill-equipped we were. Excuse me. Our flashlight was useless. We didn't have any kind of weapon. We also began feeling like sitting ducks. After about 10 to 15 minutes, we hadn't heard anything, and I mean nothing. No sounds, no noises at all, no dogs barking, no footsteps or twigs cracking, no leaves rustling. We decided it would be useless, even dangerous, to try to negotiate a search in such overgrown and steep terrain without flashlights or weapons. So we drove back downhill to our cabin, stayed outside, listened some more, heard nothing, and eventually we went back inside the cabin and went to sleep. The next day we woke early, went to work. We scoured the newspaper for anything that would shed light. We found nothing. We even called the sheriffs and reported the incident and asked them if they had any other reports, to which they said no. After work, we came back to the cabin and spent some time fixing the place up. We made dinner, ate, and again we were hanging out, sitting around, and decided to go outside. We went out there 10 minutes and we heard the same scream. Now this really spooked us, as it seemed to be coming from the same area as the night before. A few minutes later we heard it again, but again it now seemed to be coming from 150 feet to the right of where we first heard it. Then nothing, but totally quiet for about 10 minutes, and eventually the night sounds returned. This would scare the shit out of anybody. Rattled, we went back inside, talked about it, gradually moving on to other subjects with the things settling down. It was midnight when all of a sudden there was a massive slam against the door. It was on the east end of the cabin. We all jumped up, scared out of our skins, and yelled, "What the F?" and stared at the door. The door was a Z-frame door made out of 2-inch dimensional lumber and was secured with large wrought iron T-shaped hinges, a large metal latch, and doorknob. A few seconds later, another massive wham that shook the wall. Man, we jumped and quickly shoved a large dresser against the door, and we all leaned against it. Good thing too, because then there was another resounding slam and then another. We felt like someone was using a battering ram. We started yelling that we had a shotgun, even though we didn't, and we're going to use it in the hope we could scare whatever it was. Anyways, whatever it was stopped And after a while, we got up and piled more furniture against the door and even barricaded the other door. It took us a couple of hours to fall into fitful sleep. You slept after that? Wow. I think we all kept waking up throughout the night because of fear. Actually, when there's adrenaline dump, it's easy to fall asleep after the adrenaline dump. Now the door opened onto a very, Now that door opened onto a very weathered, rickety landing without stairs, and that landing was almost 6 feet above the ground on that end of the house because of the slope of the property. The landing jutted out 3 feet from the house and was 4 foot wide and had a rickety 2x4 handrail running around the 3 sides, with one side being open where the stairs used to be. So, the next morning, when it was light out, we went outside to that side of the house to take a look, and we couldn't figure it out. We looked at the door and wall on that end of the house and how steep the ground was and couldn't figure out how something big enough could have gotten up onto the landing, since the stairs were laying in the tall grass and there's only one stringer left attached to the deck joist. We tried to climb up onto the landing and it was very difficult since there were a lot of rusty nails sticking out where the 2 missing stair stringers had been nailed into the landing joist. When one of us got onto the landing, it was apparent that there wasn't enough room to charge the door and body slam it. We tried with feeble results. The landing just wasn't really stable enough to hold 2 people. So we knew that nothing could have climbed onto that landing without collapsing it. We figured it would have had to have had wings, or it would have had to have been 12 feet tall in order to bang on it with its fists. But we knew something had assaulted that east-facing wall and door, and since the door and wall had deep, fresh scuff marks on them, we felt that confirmed it. As we were looking around, we noticed large chunks of firewood laying on the tall grass/weeds. We tried to throw them, but they were so heavy we could only heave them 6 to 8 feet. So we didn't think much of them, other than be perplexed why perfectly good firewood would be strewn there. Since each of these attacks were preceded by the horrendous spine-chilling screams, we were sure they were somehow related. The next 2 nights were a repeat of the terror of the previous nights, each night starting around midnight. The only difference was the duration and intensity of the ferocious assault increased, and each night we put our backs up against the barricaded furniture, and the next morning we went outside to investigate. We noticed the large chunks of firewood were still obvious, though in different locations. We moved out the 6th day. That was a pretty good stretch, 6 days. Not too many people would last that long. So after thinking about it over the years, I figured it had to be a large cryptid, most likely Bigfoot, which at the time I did not believe were real. And it must have laid claim to that area of meadow and the water in the pool and was pissed we had moved into the pool cabin. So it was hurling those chunks of firewood at the door to frighten us out. It worked. And the screams were a sound it had learned to mimic when it had scared the bejesus out of some poor woman who had seen it and then screamed bloody murder. Endo email. You never know. Maybe they are intentionally mimicking a woman's terror scream. You never know, right? Because that is frickin' effective on human beings, right? Raises the hackles on any human being. That's terrifying. Don't know why they're doing it. Haven't a clue myself. Not until one comes up and tells me what's up, word for word. But anyway, here I go. Time for some hay slinging. And then I think I might have 2 cords of wood left to split. I think that's going to be, 6 or 7 cords of wood. I've been hammering on and getting that done too. And I got a bunch of other stuff to do as well. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to the coast probably tomorrow. And I'm going to film and film and film in the middle of nowhere. And I'm also really digging on the topographical maps, trying to pick which remote lake I'm going to get flown into in north central British Columbia. That's going to be an absolute ridiculous frickin' adventure. And I'm going to hopefully be able to share it with you guys as I'm going through. If my plan goes through, and if I can find a small generator to go with that Starlink thing that we bought for this shop. And that'd be pretty crazy, right? Wouldn't that be freaking interesting? Especially if I could flash it up live and show you guys where I am. That'd be so weird. That'd be so weird to go to the places I'm familiar with that are so remote. It's absolutely silly. And then be able to stream that place live to all of the people. That'd be crazy. It's going to be crazy. Anyway, I'll be back shortly. Share my story at howtohunt.com.